I'm Barry Farber, and this is Diamond Minds. Diamond Minds, performance under pressure. What is important about performing under pressure are four key areas, like a diamond, four different sides, okay? One, mind, body, food, fitness, how we utilize those to perform under pressure. But you know what's really important? Laughter. Laughter is the greatest medicine in the world, and we have a special guest, an Emmy award-winning actor, producer, comedian. Kenan Thompson joins us. Yes, Kenan Thompson from Saturday Night Live. Thanks for coming on, Kenan. What a special treat.
Thanks for having me.
You know what I love is when I first met you, you're so down to earth. And I think that comes from, this show is about performance under pressure. And you've gone through so many situations under pressure. People don't realize what you went through in your life. I really would like to start in the early years. First of all, the crazy thing is I'm in Atlanta, your hometown, and you're in New York, kind of my hometown from New Jersey. And here we are. Yeah, I want to know, tell me, what is it that, when you talk about what you've learned from, whether it's the first agent that you sat by his house overnight to see if you could find him because of what you went through with that adversity, and the 2 years of dealing with this. People think some people just have success so fast, but talk about the performance under pressure when you were in situations that taught you the most about life.
Well, that overnight stalking situation that I did with my buddy was for the bad accountant, actually. But yeah, that's a special story in its own right, because, before you know the business, someone teaches you the business. Hopefully it's not necessarily a hard lesson like the one I learned, and you actually can just like go to school and learn these things. But, whatever. I was, my mom was young, and, we all made a mistake, I guess, by giving power of attorney to a person that, wasn't someone that was of caliber as far as character is concerned. So that was a hard lesson, but you talk about performing under pressure, man. Like, I just had to get back out there and continue to do so because I had nothing else. You know what I mean? Like, being an actor was kind of the only thing I had done up until that point. And I didn't really know another way to make a living. And I wasn't a child anymore, so I wasn't trying to just, be under my mom's roof necessarily. And I had a career going. So it wasn't like I was starting from scratch. I was just putting on hold a little bit more of a casual approach to my career and just kept my foot on the gas, basically. So, yeah, performing under the pressures of being broke, that's definitely one of them. But also performing in front of people in general is tough, so you just have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps a lot of the times and just get out there and do it anyway. One of those cliche sayings is, get the courage after you do the thing you're terrified of. And that's kind of the only way it goes.
Yep. The courage that you had to come back and focus. But what I want to talk about is the early years. And you had this saying throughout your book, which I loved, and I'll share in a second. But you talked about family and comedy as your passion, and your mother, who was amazing what she did and how many jobs she had and took care of you at an early age. And throughout your life, you talk a lot about her. What was the first acting piece? Was it 5 years old in a church? Take me back to the beginning days of when you had people don't realize how long you've been at this.
Yeah, it's been all my life. The first acting thing I ever did was I played the gingerbread man,
Right.
Which is, it's a kindergarten play, basically, which is a little bit of a technicality. But my personal technicality is that I was the gingerbread man. I wasn't like the stove or the table. You know what I'm saying?
And that was your first. And so, I read these stories. Everybody, it was your brother went downstairs and said to your mother and father, Kenan has people in his room. And when he went back up, he realized you had all your action figures and toys and you were doing impressions. At what age were you when that happened? What was that? How old were you?
Yeah, that was around the same time, 5, 6, 7, just very early adolescent years, basically. And, just a kid with an imagination with not too many, we didn't have so many toys that they have these days, and then, there were toys available. It wasn't like we had an abundance of them because we just weren't like overly rich. We weren't necessarily poor, but like we weren't like overly indulged as far as like having technology kind of distractions. So we had action figures and matchbox cars and a carpet basically, and I made a little city off the design of a carpet, just using your imagination, which I think was a powerful tool that not enough kids get to explore nowadays because it's kind of just ready made for them in their hands these days, which is a
Right.
cool thing as well. It's just a different, perspective.
I'm going to jump ahead because you're in your book, and I'm going to walk over now, and I just want to show. When I picked this up at the airport, and one of the things that I love, it's when I was your age, life lessons, funny stories, and questionable parenting advice from a professional clown. Just, I love this book. Every
Thank you.
single one of every single one of these pages resonates with me, being a parent, which my kids are much older than yours. But what are some of the lessons that you've learned over the years that you're transferring over to your kids? Because what you just said about I used to play with matchbox cars, build forts in my room. The imagination that you had as a kid is so tremendous to build some creativity, and we're just so hooked on the phone these days. Tell me some of the key things, because now you're a father of two young girls, and tell me some of the key things that you've done. And I know it's not easy, that you've
Yeah.
really shared with your kids to learn these lessons now when they're 4, 6, 7 years old.
One of my, favorite things to remind them to do is to look up, you know what I mean? Especially when we're in the cars, like lift your head up and like look around. There's a lot going on, and like, our kids love to like get into their iPads when we go to restaurants, and like, that's somewhat, on me as far as like giving them what they want all the time. But a lot of the time I say no. I'm like, no, we're here to like have a moment with each other. You should, if you don't want to talk to us, like look around the restaurant, you know what I mean? And just, bring up some conversation kind of thing. If you don't want to personally tell me about your day, like let's look around and people watch or something like that. And just to engage them as far as, being able to like go back and forth instead of just watching the screen all day. Um,
Right.
but at the same time, they have a wealth of knowledge about things. Like, my big girl asked me about, a certain state, and I'll mention, I'll just happen to be like, well, what's the capital? And she'll know it, you know what I mean? And that's not necessarily a lesson that I sat down and taught her, or like an over like school kind of test kind of thing either. It's just something that she picked up on her own, just like surfing or whatever, which is, that generation's, tool to kind of skip over some things or whatever. So the balance of the two is always where we try to like focus on, like having some time to like, be a part of the, current world and the current society, and like be aware and, kind of good at the tools that are available, but at the same time, know how to like write in cursive as well, like the
Mhm.
balance.
Correct. Right. There's a funny story you talk about in your book where I'm going to turn this car around right now if you don't get in shape. You know how many times I've said to Mikey, I'm going to turn that car around,
Right now.
and you never do. Right. The funny story is once they know you don't, you're in trouble. Right.
Oh,
But
absolutely. But I,
talk
I,
about
I
discipline.
swear, don't you test me.
Yeah, it's too many timeouts. You got to, but you do have to deliver on your statement. Because they're little diamonds in the rough. They're being formed every second, every movement. It's not just what you say; it's what you do, and so forth. So, talk about the mind of a child and what you've learned being a parent, and how critical is to let them know that life has some difficulties. And I'm just curious how you've shared that now that you've been a parent for a while.
Yeah, like I think any ups and downs, like when they're learning to walk, or when they really start having memories past like age 3, and they actually fall down and remember what that pain feels like, and it's like, all right, like we identify that that's a painful thing, but is it something that is, something that we have to focus on for the rest of the day, or is it getting better as time moves on? You know what I mean? And once you realize that things do get better as time moves on, there's no need to like overly focus on the negative of situations, and try to find even if it is a negative situation, just try to find the lesson in it, you know what I mean? Or try to find the positivity in it or whatever, and just lean towards the positive if you can, and that's tough to
Hmm.
explain to a child. A lot of the times they just, kind of want to feel the pain, and you want to be, coddled and babied a little bit. It feels
Hmm.
good to have someone like hover over you a lot of the time, but I don't think it does them, much service as far as like learning, what they can handle on their own kind of thing, and it just builds character for you to eat a little dirt sometimes.
Right. I love how you learned from your parents, your mom and dad, and you try to impart that information and knowledge to your kids. But more importantly, you're also learning on the run. Nobody can give you the book of how to manage and raise kids, myself
No,
included. There were things that were crazy, but you have a happy medium and a balance you're trying to figure out. Even though it's not perfect, you've learned a lot of things from your parents. How's that working for you now with that merging of your parents, what they've done with you, and which is tremendous, and then also your knowledge.
yeah, I've definitely like as soon as I became a parent, I morphed into my parents. It's just one of those things like you don't understand like why your mom wants you to call her as much as she does until you have a child. Like you worry. It's your job and responsibility to take care of these people for so long, and then all of a sudden, they think that they're adults and they don't need you. You know what I mean, or something like that. Like you can't just turn it off. So I did stand my mom for a long time until I had a child, and now I completely get it. You know what I mean? And I apologized to her profusely because I was just like, I'm so I was just an idiot. You know what I mean? Just being a kid and just you know acting like it was a burden to check in. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. When it's just like, oh, mom, don't worry, I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like kind of being
Mhm.
nonchalant about me coming back home because I always felt like I wasn't even going out to do much, you know what I mean? But you never know and nothing's guaranteed and you don't
Right.
understand that until you get much older, basically. So, you
I
try to
know.
just be patient with them and, it's just all about putting up the bumper rails when we go bowling. You know what I mean? If that's a good euphemism for how life goes, basically. Like let them do their kind of thing and know you're there to catch them a little bit or whatever, but they got to play the game, and they have to like
Yep.
understand why I worry or why I feel passionate about them having their manners or understanding like how to treat others and stuff like that. Like it's just important that you gently guide them on a consistent basis about all of those things.
Yeah. I think you really had some amazing messages in your book that I took to heart because of the things that you've gone through as a child. Like when you and I'm older than you, I know that. But when I was a kid, I'd take my Schwinn bicycle down the shore for I'd go. I'm talking about it's an hour drive in a car, and my friend and I on a one speeder going down to the shore on our bike. Mom, I'll see you at 7. And
Right.
okay, be careful. That was
Yeah.
no helmet, no nothing. So
Yeah.
today, sometimes we have too much protection, and it's a very hard fine line to be able to let your kids, fall a little or
Yeah.
realize that that's going to teach them something for the future that'll give them that internal strength, right?
Yeah. That's why I understand, people that live in like super duper suburbs or they live in, small historic towns where it seems boring, because they do want that lifestyle of keeping the front door unlocked and open and letting their kids just go out when the sun comes up and they come back
Hmm.
when the sun gets dark or whenever when they get hungry or something like that and they don't have to worry because there's nothing for them to get into basically except for like growing up is concerned, so like riding bikes or going down to the creek, what I mean, all those like good kind of Huckleberry Finn kind of towns,
Yep.
basically. But you know, a lot of people don't have that luxury either. So you just figure it out. It's always more than just the parents as well. It's always a village. If you're lucky enough to be a very hands-on kind of parent, I think you realize that there's a lot of people doing it together and you get welcomed into the group, and when you do your part to contribute to the group will contribute towards you, and that's how you raise your kids.
Yeah. You're the longest running cast member on SNL over 20 years, 21 years, right, sir?
That's right,
Yes.
sir.
And
That's
now
right.
that's a hell of an accomplishment. You are a diamond. Now, once you think you're a diamond, internally, we're shot because as soon as you think you're a success, it's very dangerous. You always want to improve. I know that. But
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you've been around, and yourself included, the pressure of live TV, and you see the biggest celebrities in the world and athletes, entertainers come on the stage. Anything you could share about how people perform or perish under pressure? In other words, it's a spotlight that either you perform or you don't.
100%. I mean, the ego is probably man's biggest, villain. I would assume, as far as like the individual, going out on his daily pursuit, and like the angel and devil on your shoulder tell you to make this decision or that decision. But when it become about like how cool you are in your own mind that sways these decisions, or how you like, go through the day, that's when it becomes, dangerous, because you're not living in necessarily reality. You're living in, your version of reality, which is, the emperor has new clothes. You know what I mean? Like at some point you're going to have a realization that you're not as awesome as you might have thought in your imagination. You know what I mean? About every single thing that you think you're awesome at. And it's just better for you to, approach things with a bit of humility, and always be able to leave room for growth. Like it's a crime to think that you have it all figured out when, us as a society don't have it all figured out. So why would you think, you have it all figured out? So yeah, I try to approach everything with humility. And when you don't, I think you have moments, that are highly drastic and, a little harsher than maybe they need to do. Like there's some people that had some crazy lessons just doing live television, and they weren't necessarily prepared for anything to go awry, which is another version of cockiness, thinking that everything is just going to be perfect. You know what I'm saying? So I've witnessed, a lot of different versions of that. Like, and not to say that it was necessarily any particular fault on this person's, particular like way they went about it, but it definitely was something that they were prepared for, which is like, all right, why wouldn't you be prepared for something to go left when you're doing live television and you think that you don't have to learn these things? Like that's a bit of like immaturity, but as well, it's a little bit of ego thinking that like, no, everything is fine. Like, of course, everything is fine. So yeah, I've seen, several instances of that.
I was going to say you started out with ego being a very, could be very dangerous. And I heard somebody speaking say this once. They said ego stands for EGO, edging God out. When we think we're like the omnipotent, where success is, we're so successful, and in your mind, we learn more from failure, from adversity, from setbacks, from ridicule than anything else. And is there something that you could share? By the way, I want to tell the audience something. I'm sure you heard this many times, that Kenan is like grounded and this and that, but he's the real deal. There's a lot of celebrities out there and people who attain such status. But when I met him, and I met him several times over and over, I want to say that was the greatest feeling, to know that you're so grounded and had come through so much adversity. Well, I'd say a lot of different situations that built your character that way. And that's why what you're just saying now, I can say you're 100% right. It's not like you're saying it for the camera or for the content. You know exactly what, that is that ego that gets in the way of our performance because we think we are way above every other person, and that'll bring us down faster than anything. And we haven't known each other a long time, but I'm telling you, you're a person of your word. You say it, you do it, and I just think that's very rare. A lot of times, people underestimate the power of that groundedness you have throughout reading your book too, seeing it in real life and in your book. And if there's anything you could share, any funny situation on SNL where you saw people where you don't have to name names if you don't want, but I mean just things that have happened where the ego got in the way, and that's where you learned a lesson from them.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, not to put, like, oh, she had an ego and that's why the situation happened, but like there is some bit of ego in the situation. Like when you think about what happened to Ashley Simpson, right? And she had one of the biggest, like, this is live television moments ever. And what happened to her
Yeah.
was she was exposed for lip syncing or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But like everybody, sings along to a backup track kind of thing. But the problem was they started to play her first song over again, and then her backup vocals came in, but she hadn't started to participate in it because she knew it was the first song being played over again and thought it was just a mistake and they would cut it by that point. So she just didn't, do anything. And then, it continued to kind of like spiral or whatever because now her voice is singing and she's not singing. So everybody's like, oh, she's lip syncing or whatever, all in the same exact moment. And she just, kind of like did a hold down dance and like danced off the stage, like, oh well, like I just, you know, got effed over or whatever, and it's no big deal. But had she kind of embraced the moment or whatever and been like, wait, cut, blah, 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 and like, kind of grab the reins a little bit, she might have been able to, finagle out of it and, it might not have been such a big deal or whatever. But to me, since she didn't do that, it felt like she felt maybe that she was supposed to be a little more protected than that, and like that's not necessarily how it works. A lot of the time, nobody's got your back in certain situations because they're not expecting that thing to happen either. But when you're the artist, you're the person that's out there, you have to kind of be aware of all of that. And I don't know if it's necessarily ego that was in the way of her seeing that kind of light or if it was just inexperience, but I feel like there's a little bit of a splash of ego in there to just, kind of just let that happen like that and just, be like, oh, it's not my fault. It's everybody. It's like nobody's going to be like, oh, it wasn't her fault. It's everybody else's fault and let's blame them. Like she hasn't been able to really bounce back from that.
Mm. I think about adversity and any adversity in the past I wouldn't trade for anything. As a matter of fact, it is the way we wake up and see the reality. And one of the things, many things happened to you in your book that I was reading, especially the part where not only you went broke and what that agent did, and you said something so interesting, and you learned a lot of lessons. One of them is karma. That's his karma, not my karma. Right? In other words, so many times we take somebody else took advantage of us and it kills us inside, but who's that hurting? If we keep that inside, we have to push that off and move on. Can you share with the audience all the lessons about that pressure that produced kind of really the diamond inside you that you perform so well now that people don't really understand how you've gone through all that? What are some of the lessons beyond just karma is their karma, not my karma, when somebody screws you?
I mean, there's a lot of lessons. Like there was lessons, just being one of the only people in my family that's doing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I definitely was the first doing it at this level kind of thing. Like my brother's into it, too, but like, it's different. Like I, was the first one to really be on a TV show for real, and like doing movies for real. Like,
Mhm.
so the dynamic of, being a person that's having all these experiences, but then at the same time, I spend all my most cherished time with people that have very drastically different experiences, is one thing that's just like, oh, life is, very different for everybody kind of thing. And that puts pressure on your back to kind of maintain, you know, I'm still myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I know I get to meet Shaq or I get to meet, whoever, you know what I mean? But I
Mhm.
can still come back to Virginia and kick it with my cousins like I want to. That's a pressure in its own right to not have to like be a two-faced individual. Like I'm not, a different person over here than I am over here. Like I can
Mhm.
just continue and be myself.
It's
And,
awesome.
having,
Yep.
having knowledge of self and all that, and like the confidence to like look in the mirror and be like, yeah, okay, this is what we're working with today. Like it's fine, and not be too hard on yourself.
Mhm.
But also just embracing the moment too. Like performance would do that for you. Like I know a lot of, athletes or, singers or dancers or anybody that, performs in front of others will agree, when the moment hits, you either, you either ride or die. You know what I'm saying? Like you either perform or you don't, basically. Sink or swim kind of thing.
Yep.
Like there's a reason like all those cliches, exist because that is, how life goes, basically. When it's your turn, and the lights, shines on you, you either get applause or you don't, and then if you continue to seek out those things or whatever, hopefully it turns into a career for you that you can, bear fruit from or whatever. And I've been very blessed in many a way that I've been able to continue through adversities. But yeah, that pressure creates diamonds because I'm pretty fearless in front of people nowadays, no matter if I'm, prepared or not. And that's not necessarily that's not ego. It's just, experience and also maintaining the joy of performing as well. Like, don't let us just put pressure on every single thing and like make you guys, kind of wiggle away from it because you don't want to have to deal with stuff like that. Like, the pressure is one thing, but like the actual ice cream sundae of it all is the gift of making someone laugh or the gift of someone telling you that, what you did touched their hearts or their families in such a way and stuff like that. So think about the payoffs as well.
This show is about sharing with people's lives who are diamonds, and I consider you a diamond mind, but your performance under pressure is what made that. And I think that what you just said, I mentioned this in another show where life is like a grindstone. It either grinds people down or it polishes you up. It's all how you take that information and move on to the next level. And I've seen you do that over and over, not just in, people interviewing you in your book and talking to you, but that is the secret. Sometimes we there's people that just fail and they're finished. And there's other people that take that as a learning lesson and move on and really apply it to their life. And you've done that so well. And I want to just ask you something. You could share something about that because you do that where you inside yourself when it was the year 2000 and you were in LA and the story about, finishing Nickelodeon and you were looking and you were too young to have an adult role and you were dealing with all that. But you just dug deep down. And what was that like? Where was the moment where you said, the hell with it, I'm going all out, going to these auditions, I'm going to do what changed your mind there?
I mean, I think the biggest wake up call was, this accountant trying to just, disappear with my money, basically. Like that was one of the biggest like shatterings of, the bubble that I had been living in up until that point, because up until that point I was, very fortunate. Like it was hard getting into the business, but once I landed my first big role in, which like was me as a movie critic on a kids news show. Like I call it a big role, but it was a local TBS news show, but it was a steady gig. So that was big for me. And that led into the Mighty Ducks, which was even like an official really big job. It's like a real movie, which led to Nickelodeon. So like I had been, kind of working steadily or whatever, which is a very fortunate kind of thing. And then when I was ready to take a break from it and kind of do something different, because I had been working so much for 7 years or whatever it was, I didn't have the luxury to do so. It was like, it was like a super duper wake up call. So that was definitely one of the whole, like, life's not going to just be, an easy, smooth path, even if you're good at something kind of thing. You just never know how the ball's going to bounce, and you got to be prepared to just roll with it.
You were looking at that double staircase house for $400,000 in Atlanta. I just love that story. Yeah. You got to get his book, by the way. You got to get his book. I'm serious. It's ridiculous. I read that so fast on the plane and in the car ride here. I just loved what you said, though. You said now from that, what I took from that is I can really read people better. I can look them in the eye and I can get a sense of their core of who they are. That's a critical thing for people who are being taken advantage by a lot of people in your position. And that's a real skill that you can learn only from being, dumped on. So.
Yeah. I mean, life has a way of, like you said, creating diamonds out of pressure or something, precious out of a lump of coal or, you just gotta like trudge through the mud to get to paradise sometimes. And it makes it all the more sweeter, like we wouldn't know a sunny day if it wasn't for the rainy ones, and
Yes.
you just gotta keep that kind of perspective, man, because otherwise you're gonna be constantly shocked by things that happen that you weren't expecting. There's no way for you to predict what's gonna happen that's gonna shock you. You just have to, kind of take it in and give yourself the time it takes to mourn or whatever, but you can't let that be the end all defining thing of the rest of your life, like especially if you're a young person, there's people living into their hundreds these days. So you're gonna spend, 80 years, dwelling on one specific thing. It feels like a waste of time.
Right. And the lessons you've learned. Any advice for young people today who are in a situation where sometimes it's tough to tell them something because you're not going through it and they're going through it and they're saying, you don't know me, you don't know what I'm going through, but they're going through
Yeah.
something where it's either anxiety or adversity or setbacks or people thinking they're not, who are they? They're not going to make it. And maybe there's some real raw talent in there that needs to be developed. Any advice for the people that are struggling like that?
Well, if I'm going to give advice, let me take my glasses off.
Okay.
If you're going through adversity, number one, understand that you're not the only one going through things. There's lots of people in this world that are going through wild, wild, wild stuff. So my heart goes out to you if you are, in an adverse situation, and I hope you make it through to the other side. But at the same time, you're not the first, and you won't be the last. So that's something, that's something to look towards and be like, yo, I'm not alone in this. So like, what else can I do? All right, let me figure out how to get to the other side of this. And what is the other side of it? Is it, letting a good cry out? Is it, trying to educate myself about something? Is it just survival in general? Like whatever it is, it's worth it. You know what I mean? Because when you do get to the other side, you'll be all the better for it, in my opinion. I'm praying that this is the case. But you just gotta fight. There's nothing else that you can do. You know what I mean? And there's nothing in this world that's of value that's not worth fighting for. So that's just how it goes.
Hmm. Well said, Keenan. And I don't really like to touch on either religion or politics in this program. It's about sharing advice and ideas so people can watch and maybe gain some ideas to change their life or make it a little better. And we can never give a full answer sometimes because people have to go through it themselves. But I wanted to see if there's something that you can talk about regarding the pain. Like, for instance, I believe that there is a spirit that runs through all things. I don't know what that is. I mean, I think it was Einstein who said that when he was studying, physics and then metaphysics, said there has to be like a God that does this. To make water the viscosity of what it is. If you changed it by 1/100th of a percent, we wouldn't have life on Earth. Everything is such perfection. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that believe that God is within, and like I'm, a big believer in everybody's version. I'm not necessarily a big fan of atheism necessarily, just because it's so kind of like whatever-ish, and I don't think the harmony of the universe and our existence in it is a whatever-ish situation. Like the balance it takes for Earth to exist and for life to exist on Earth is wild. There's chaos in all directions around here. You know what I mean? But the fact that we're the perfect amount of distance from the sun to allow this sort of life to grow to where at this point we are in two different locations talking to each other and we can see each other. It's like, oh my man, like that is a harmony that you can't just dismiss. That's
Yeah.
you can't dismiss it to randomness, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But at the same time, faith without action is waste, basically. So you have to do your part as well. You know what I mean? Like you can, believe anything you want and you can pray as many times as you want, but a lot of the time you do have to get out there and put a foot forward on those things that you want. But yeah, man, like it's also a nice feeling of comfort. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'll be the fool. Like if I die and that's just it, and there is no afterlife and no sweetness on the other side or whatever, okay, I'm the fool. But at that point, who cares? But
Right.
if we are right, us people that do believe in spirituality and things like that, you know what I mean? Like, how terrible would it be to get to that point and had denied it up until that point? You know what I mean? Like, what a travesty to have a realization of like, oh snap, I'm in the dummy boat basically at that time. You know, like like what's it going to hurt for you to just like take in what people are saying about their experiences about having a soul, or the different versions of, there's more to life than just what's on the surface. It doesn't cost you
Right.
anything.
I love what you're saying because it's a whole show in its of itself, and I know you would just think about like I'm thinking about something and my wife says it, okay? How does that happen? Is it because we know each other so well, or then somebody thinks you call somebody and all of a sudden they say, I was just thinking about you? Are our thoughts moving through another wave of some kind of, I mean, look at, you could see it in the nature, in the natural world where birds can
Yeah.
communicate in other countries to each other and how they go through the distance and or trees underground communicate to save each other from a danger of being eaten by another animal. Or I see this all the time and I wonder, we're here right now. This is heaven. I feel like this is a blessing to take the most advantage of right now.
And God bless your perspective, man. Like I love to hear that. I'm the exact same way. Like I'm fascinated by, we call it, oh, that's the universe for you these days, because it just feels so out of my hands when certain things happen. Like we'll talk about a topic and then someone from that topic will appear in our lives, just naturally. Or like you said, you'll have a thought and your wife will actually say it. Like I've seen David Blaine do tricks with people, like just doing mentalism where he had Jamie Foxx blindfold himself or whatever, and he touched
Right, I
his
saw it.
shoulder or he touched his friend, and Jamie Foxx thought he said he felt somebody touch his shoulder, like all those kinds of things. Like, how is that possible? Like, how do you explain that, or whatever?
Mhm.
And, these certain things are left to, higher powers, in my opinion, because we don't have all the answers. So someone, above us, that does, that's a higher power to me, kind of thing. And we're just, waiting on the day to when we get exposed to all the knowledge of the universe. But you don't have to wait on that day. If you just listen to music or watch movies, there are so many people trying to tell you their versions of that it has to be coming kind of from somewhere. So I think it's a beautiful thing to engage, man, because the common denominator in all these religions is love. You know what I mean? So if you're going through life loving your fellow person, loving yourself, like that's a pretty sweet life, man.
Yep. Um, Amadeus Mozart in the film, they said like it was like almost somebody was talking to him and having him write the notes, and it was just coming from a higher power. We could go on
Yeah.
about this, but I want to move on to something because fate is a hunter. You know what I mean? The inventor of GI Joe told me once. He goes, Barry, fate's a hunter, because everybody thinks, well, it's fate. It happened. No, fate's a hunter. You have to have action. You have to step out of your comfort zone, because successful people know that being comfortable, being uncomfortable is the key, is to push yourself that way. So I'm sitting in a restaurant. I want you to share. I really want to know what your thoughts were, because here I am. I'm in a restaurant in New York and I see you, and I know more than me at the time, my kids, Mighty Ducks and Good Burger, and all, they are the hugest fans of you. And I had to go over and say hello. And some people said, don't bother him, don't bother. But you know what? I don't, I got to take a chance sometimes, right? So I came over and I showed you the pen unfolding, right? Just can you tell me what your thoughts were then? I'm just curious for people out there that are either afraid, and I understand where a lot of people come at you and you want to spend time with your family, and you weren't with your family, but you were with a good friend or your partner. I
Yeah.
think it was your producer. But anyway, just can you share with what was your insights? I never asked you that.
I mean, my insight is like, here's a guy out here taking an idea and putting action to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could probably learn something from this dude, because I had an idea, but like I didn't really take the action on it to actually put my hands on it and actually make it a thing. And the crazy thing about it is, like, now I see that exact same idea. I saw it on Instagram the other day, and I had this idea like 10 years ago, but it was like sleeping. It was like a walking sleeping bag, basically. So you didn't have to like fold out a sleeping bag. You could just wear it, and then when it was time to like go to bed, just lay down, kind of thing.
That that
And
I
it was
don't
like
worry.
it was
We have
for the homeless. Like it was like a
we
thing for the homeless, not people that sleep on the street or whatever. But now, like I was trying to figure out, like how do you do it in the daytime? Is there a way to like self-inflate? Like, are you gonna have to like pump it up, or you can inflate it by walking? And then I saw this one dude that like, fully developed the idea, and like I was like, that's awesome, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it was like, it was a two-headed monster. It was like it's awesome for that person, and it's also awesome that it validated that I do have ideas that are actually, things that could be good for the world. You know what I mean? Because someone actually
I'm
had
gonna
the same idea.
I'm gonna put you together with the wizard, my friend Ernie. We're gonna figure that out. We talked about that, and then I
Yeah.
wanted to share with me anything that you want to say about comedy in general, because laughter is the best medicine for people. I mean, when I belly laugh with friends or watching you or any comedian, there's something happens to our brain, and it's a health. They a thousand things. It's so 10 times easier to smile than frown, and all that information. What can you share about comedy as really sometimes the key to dealing with adversity or a marriage or anything?
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing better than when you are bawling your eyes out and someone close to you gets you to a point where you laugh at something and it just puts a plug in all of that, like just gush of seemingly uncontrollable emotion, right? That's headed in a way of just pain. Like when you're just like so down about something, or you're just so like upset, or you're crying your eyes out. And then, someone, tells you a joke to like lift your spirit and remind you that, life is cyclical, and,
Sure.
there's no reason to like just stay going in a downward trajectory, if you will, even if it's just emotional. And, what a blessing it is to have a person like that in your life, or to have your own personal sense of humor that registers those things and reminds you that that was funny and that there's funny things in the world. And yeah, comedy is a very special thing that is, able to do that for people.
All your success, I'd like to hear what your definition of success is today after what you've went through and your rise to success. What is your definition of success today, Kenan?
Success, I think, is, honestly, it's what others consider your presence to be, in my opinion. Like the more people that say that they bumped into me and I'm a nice guy, or I'm a real one, or whatever, like that is the success to me. Like financial burden, of course, is just adulthood. So if you can put that aside and figure out a way to manage that, great. But that's not all there is to like being a success. Is to be loved, is to be missed when you're not there, and yeah, the more people echo, you know, the fact that you are how you are, or whatever, in any sort of way that's positive when you're not around, or just when your name comes up in conversation, like that is success. Like when I overhear people talking two tables away and they don't even know I'm in the restaurant, but they're talking about SNL, and then, my name comes up as one of their favorites. Like that's a success. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a real success. Or raising a family, you know what I mean? And like looking at your kids being able to sustain and maintain and be good people and be good, patrons for the earth, kind of thing. Like that is a real success. Like people, I think, put too much like hand in hand success and money together. And it's not just that, you know what I'm saying? Like money comes and goes, but I think like real success is a lifelong, thing that's based on your reputation.
You've definitely achieved success, my friend. And I got to tell you, there's a statement by William Danforth, the founder of Ralston Purina Company. I think it was in the 20s or 30s. He said, the key to success is to be your own self at your very best all the time. Very hard to do. People want to, well, maybe I should act this way for this person, but you've demonstrated that. And one of the biggest statements I heard him say was, the key to success, he said, is catch a passion for helping others and a richer life comes back to you. And I think that's what you've done. You have a passion for what you do ever since you were 5 years old, and all these different experiences you had, and now you're giving back in a way where you're making people laugh. And I bet you're saving a lot of lives. I'm telling you right now, because people can really enjoy not just your movies, your comedy, and the things that you don't know about that people are really, my kids, people all around have just enjoyed your career to give back in such a way. I really appreciate you giving more time than I asked for, and that's the type of person you are. You're the man.
Oh, I mean, I appreciate it, man. It's genuine. I can't really help it. Like, I'm the guy that will hop out of his car to like save a person who's driving up the street with, their laptop on their trunk. Basically, I did it the other day. You know what I'm saying? Like, people just, don't realize a lot of the time, like, and you put your coffee on the top of the car and you drive off or whatever. But I saw this guy in front of me and his laptop bag was on his trunk and he was about to like drive away and we were on the highway and I was like, yo, I hopped out of the car without even thinking, you know what I mean? So it's just naturally kind of who I am. And I love people and I love to root for people, at the same time. So, I'm rooting for all of you.
Kenan, really appreciate the time you gave me with. Really, I think people are going to get a lot out of your ideas and wisdom about that performance under pressure. And you are a diamond mine in my book. And thank you a million times for coming on. It's really nice, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Kenan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. It's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Kenan Thompson, somebody who demonstrates the ability to be humble, not just on the screen, but off the screen as well. And what he shared, the 3 key takeaways is, number 1 is be in that moment. Embrace the moment, no matter if it's good or bad, especially if it's bad, and take that information to move on to the next time. And second, be your own self at your very best all the time. Be your own self. Don't try to make believe you're somebody else. People connect with you because they see you inside of who you are. That's the real deal, Kenan Thompson. And number 3 is the person that does you wrong, it's their karma, not your karma. It's going to go, what goes around comes around. It'll eventually come back to that person. And instead of taking it inside and letting it eat you out inside all the time and pull you down, push it away and move on. Action is the best way to get rid of that and move forward. And let somebody know later in life that that's the benefit of dealing with adversity. That's the benefit of dealing with people that say you can't do something, tell you no, give you setbacks, ridicule, whatever it might be. Because guess what? We're not going to be around here too long. In 100 years, nobody cares what people said about you, what you did, what happened. You have to remember that so that when you move forward in a positive way that makes a difference in your life. And you realize that performance under pressure is the greatest gift in the world to find out that diamond inside you that'll take you to another level. This is Barry Farber. Thanks for joining us, and may your future be as bright as a diamond.